to shift to another aspect of the fire at Notre-Dame, and that is somebody says Yaron versus the world. Yep, it's me and a bunch of you, hopefully, a bunch of you versus the world, and that's really the truth of it. Right? So another aspect of the burning of Notre-Dame relates to philanthropy, and I found this interesting and fascinating, but it also reflects of kind of the state of the world in which we live. So some say that about $1 billion, I've seen various figures from 600 million to $1 billion have been donated to rebuild those parts of Notre-Dame Cathedral that have burnt down. And it's not clear yet how expensive the reconstruction is, how weakened are parts of the foundations that didn't burn down. There's a lot still to be figured out, and there's a lot of work still to be assessed. But something about 600 million to $1 billion have been raised philanthropically through contributions by philanthropists, by rich people. In one particular case, 2 well-known French billionaires have each contributed $100 million to the building of Notre-Dame, to the rebuilding of Notre-Dame, and these are billionaires that supposedly don't like each other. So when one donated $100 million, the other had to donate at least as much just to look good. I mean, that's what somebody wrote about them. I don't know if that's true, but anyway, lots of money has been raised, and this has created this massive backlash. Right? People on social media immediately start asking, if we can raise $1 billion to rebuild this ancient building that carries all this historical evil weight, as somebody described it earlier, right? It's a lot of money, $1 billion. Then why can't we fix or support Native American sacred lands that are being destroyed by fracking and development? What? Or, how about using that billions of dollars to rebuild historical black churches that are being destroyed by arson? By the way, everybody talks, just as an aside here for a minute, everybody talks about the attacks on churches in France and associates it with Islamic terrorism, and maybe a lot of it is associated with Islam. I don't know. But what's interesting is that there's also at the same time an epidemic of burnings of black churches all over the south of the United States, similar to what's going on in France. Vandalism and burning of churches all over the south, particularly black churches, black congregations. And not being done by Muslims, so I don't know who's doing it. Is there another force out there that might be burning black churches that are not Islam? I don't know. You guys figure it out. It just strikes me as, we're very quick to establish whole websites and very quick to lash on to some forms of violence when the violent offender is somebody that we despise, and yet we give no press or no credence to the violence and coercion against groups that we don't care if they're marginalized, like blacks in the South in the United States. Anyway, why can't we use $1 billion to restore these black churches that have been devastated through arson? By the way, so an aside again on this, which all the articles point out, as a consequence of the money raised for Notre-Dame, a bunch of money has been contributed to help black communities in the South rebuild their churches. So I guess the philanthropy begets philanthropy. All people have been complaining, how about climate change? $1 billion could go far. I don't think it can go far to deal with climate change. Or how about all the starving people in Africa? I mean, think about how much aid you could provide with $1 billion to Africa. I mean, that should be able to save tens of millions of children from dying on any given day. So there are better social causes, we are told, to spend $1 billion than this. Right? What about And this is directly related to the yellow vests, right? We've got a yellow vest, and I did a whole show on the yellow vest. We've got yellow vest demonstrations in France, complaining about inequality, complaining about the elites, complaining about the prosperity of the cities and the relative austerity in the countryside in France, complaining about the working conditions or the living conditions of the working class versus the elites in France and how well they are doing. And there have been demonstrations since November, every weekend in France. And a lot of it is about the dramatic increase in homelessness in Paris, the dramatic increase in poverty in France, supposedly. I don't have the statistics. Well, why can't we use the $1 billion towards the poverty, towards redistribution? Now, all of these complaints come from a particular point of view. Whether these are complaints that are originating on the left, on the right, on the middle, they all address this issue from the same perspective. It's the same perspective that Ray Dalio talks about in his critique of capitalism. And it's the perspective that wealth, that your money, that whatever you have created is the property of all of us. It's the property of, quote, society. And therefore we in society should be able to determine how it's used. Well, should we rebuild a cathedral or should we help the poor? But the beauty of this philanthropy is that it's voluntary. It's people's choices. Now, I don't think in my hierarchy of values, rebuilding Notre-Dame is at the top if I had $1 billion of what I would contribute money to. It's clearly not. It's not even close to the top. I would spend the money on promoting Western civilization. In other words, on promoting Enlightenment ideas. In other words, in promoting Ayn Rand's ideas. If you want to save Western civilization, you don't rebuild a cathedral. You rebuild, or you build anew, the intellectual foundations of Western civilization. You rebuild, or you build anew, the educational institutions that promote the philosophical foundations of Western civilization. And Ayn Rand did the work. Now it's just a matter of getting that work out there, applying that work, rebuilding those foundations, or building them for the first time in many cases. That means supporting thinkers, intellectuals, philosophers, whether they're in universities, whether they're in think tanks, whether they're independent. It means getting those ideas out there into the world, getting the ideas that made the Enlightenment possible into the world, and getting the ideas of Ayn Rand, who took the Enlightenment, who completed the Enlightenment project, making her mainstream. That's the work that needs to be done if you want to save Western civilization. The cathedral would not be a high priority for me. But it's not my money. And one of the principles of my idea, the ideas of, Western civilization, is that your money is yours to do as you see fit. And many rich people are putting the money into building the cathedral. Their money. But when people view wealth as a pie, remember the pie, my pie? As a collective pie, as a communal pie, as a societal pie, then wait a minute, I don't like the way the pie is being distributed. I don't like that you are sending money to the cathedral when you could be helping the poor, or you could be sending it to Paris, to Africa, or you could be, doing something else that I think is good for society. It's when we view wealth as collective, then we have the audacity, we have the gall to try to start telling people what they should do with their wealth. And ultimately, when they don't listen to us, then we advocate for taking that wealth away from them and doing it ourselves. And this is another reflection of the death or the decline of Western civilization, where this idea of telling other people what they should be doing with their wealth, not from the perspective of you know, if I had $1 billion, this is what I would do. But no, condemning them morally for doing what they do. Well, you could condemn them morally. But, you know, you could condemn them morally in the sense of saying you have a wrong moral hierarchy, right? But that's not what these people are doing, right? They have created a, you know, what's the best for society? And that is the standard by which everybody should function. And of course, who gets to decide what's best for society? They do. The climate change people, of course, it's climate change. The people who care about poverty in Africa, it's poverty in Africa. The people who care about Native American sacred lands, it's Native American sacred lands. It's their money. They can do what they want with it. You know, again, I don't think this is the right thing to do. It's not the worst thing to do. But this is not going to save Western civilization. This is not going to help in the end. It's ideas. Ideas shape history. Ideas will shape the future. Ideas drive
how can you expect to
everything.
reverse this trend when, as we've said, the country is run by majority rule through ballot, and that majority seems to prefer to vote for this modified welfare state?
Oh, I don't believe that. You know as well as I do that the majority today has no choice.
What do you
The
mean?
majority has never been offered a choice between controls and freedom.
How do you account for the fact that an almost overwhelming majority of the people who are regarded as our leading intellectuals and our leading industrialists, the men whom you seem to admire the most, the men with the muscle and the money, favor the modified capitalism that we have today?
Because it is an intellectual issue. Since they all believe in collectivism, they do favor it. But the majority of the people has never been given a choice. You know that both parties today are for socialism, in effect, for controls, and there is no party. There are no voices to offer an actual pro-capitalist, let's say fair, economic freedom and individualism. That is what this country needs today.
Isn't